that far fewer people are born the next 5 years than you see here from 0 to 4, which is the lowest bar. Well, that means that 5 years later, you have to lay off teachers because there are no students. I studied East Germany when communism fell because of, I'm also a sociologist, and you had a real revolution, and so I was interested in that. And one of the results in all over Eastern Europe was that fertility rates fell by 50%. It was just very, very difficult for the school system what to do. Half the teachers either lost the job, or they had to go down to everyone had to go down to 70%, including a reduction in pay. Economic planning is very difficult because suddenly you have no demand for stuff that you used to have a demand for. So the economic disruptions of too rapid a change in the age structure, that would be the result of too rapid a decline in population growth, often are more devastating to a society than being a bit more patient and let population growth come down in a smoother manner. Maybe there's more of an effect on resources initially, but you don't have the effect in the other sectors. It is not a one-dimensional thing. I mean, population change affects everything. And if we only look at resources, we may miss out on the social and economic disruptions. And I think these charts kind of show you what how this could come about. Well, let me very quickly then move on. Essentially, what we see is that around the world is that there's a clear relationship between economic development and population growth. Where population goes down, it actually goes more the other way. Where development takes place, population goes down. Now, those of you who know Mexico very well may say, well, what you just said cannot be true, because Mexico has been a very successful developing country. It's on the verge of becoming a developed country. Yet its fertility until recently stayed very, very high. So how can it then be that development brings down population? Well, if you look at what happened in Mexico from 1970 to 1990, when development really took off, what you will see is that a lot of the development sort of occurred and bypassed whole sectors of the economy. The rich got richer, but poor Mexicans didn't really do better. And in some instances, particularly after oil was discovered, food and housing prices, everything went up because wages in the oil sector were very good. But if you were not inside the oil sector, if you didn't get those wages, suddenly you had to pay twice as much for your tortillas and twice as much for your beans and whatever else that you needed. But you didn't benefit from this oil development because you didn't have a job there. Oil is very capital intensive. It doesn't need that many people. As soon as more Mexicans took part of development, as soon as the middle class expanded and was part of the beneficiary of development, Mexican fertility went down. I mean, it's still higher than ours, but the last 10 years it has been really going down rapidly. So there's very clear evidence that that there's a relationship between development and population, and typically it comes more from development on population than from population on development. And there's a blue ribbon, about 10 years ago now, the National Academy of Science convened really the experts in this field. I mean, from all political spectrum. I mean, some people who thought overpopulation is an issue. It was a non-ideological, sort of truly bipartisan, if you want so, commission. It's of the best practices research you could muster. And the upshot of gazillions of papers was that for developing countries, moderate population growth, one that's less than 1%, between 0 and 1%, is more helpful for economic development than no population growth. Right? And once you then get economic development going on a sustained basis, then it will go further down so that the slope that I showed you earlier will become flat again. And then the second thing we already talked about, it also comes out of this commission, namely the importance of regulatory and lifestyle changes on natural resources, replenishable and non-replenishable resources, was deemed to be greater by the Commission than pure numbers. All right, and the last two slides, church and social policies. I don't think that the church has all that much to do with our population growth. And let me give you one reason for that. In Europe, the two countries with the lowest fertility rates are Spain and Italy. Now, those are the two countries that we would think are the two prototypical Catholic countries. We know the Catholic stance on family planning, on all the issues that we know about. In those countries, people don't listen to the church teachings. As I said, people do what they got to do. In this country, for 40 years now, we have absolutely no fertility differential between Catholics and other people, either religious or non-religious. We know church teaching for fertility in the United States. It has not mattered. I mean, you devise models. It doesn't yield any difference. The big difference in Europe is that if you contrast, as I said, Spain and Italy with Sweden, what you have in Sweden, which is a very secular society, religion doesn't play a large role, but they have comprehensive family policies. So if a family decides to have a child, wife and husband can have a career, either one of them can stay home for the time that it's good to be home with your child. They support the family. Income doesn't go down. They can afford to have one or two children. In Spain and Italy, even though almost everyone is Catholic, they don't have those social legislations. And if you want to live a middle-class lifestyle, both husband and wife have to work. And there's just no room to have a child. So it's the kind of social legislation that seems to be much more important. But again, I'm not pointing to Sweden as a problem here, because even their fertility, of course, is slightly below replacement. Replacement is about 2.1 children per couple. There's some mortality, so you have to have a little bit more than two for mother and father. In Italy, it's 1.2. I mean, it's really low. Same in Spain. It's the two countries with the lowest fertility in the world. And they are Catholic. And they go to church. We can talk about a lot of issues regarding the church, and I would be the first one to enjoy that discussion. And I've written some papers on secularization, and usually I get the church people arguing against me. So that's not where I'm coming from. But when it comes to population, as I said, people do what they think they need to do, and I think they disregard what church authorities have to tell them. And we always talk about developing countries. I like to close with something we can do at home here. We are so afraid of teaching children about sex, teaching them responsible sexual behavior. There's so many of us who believe, and we are different in this country than other countries. Somehow, so many of us believe, and it's hard for me to understand this, but we believe that if we talk to teenagers about sex, they go out and do it, as though we have to tell them that. No, I mean, there are, at that age, hormones are flowing. In Sweden, there has been comprehensive sex education in schools for the last 40 years. There are studies on sexual intercourse among youth. The Swedish youth doesn't do it more often than our youth does it. But they have far fewer pregnancies, teen pregnancies. They have far fewer teen births, because they know that even though those of us who are parents, we would like that our children wait a bit and are growing up a bit more, but we also realize it's really not up to us. I mean, after a certain age, we are not in control anymore, all right? So that's when we give our children Plan B. And they do that in Sweden, and we don't do this, all right? And I think this is not just an issue of, not an issue of population growth, it's an issue of social development. It's a health issue because if we don't give them Plan B, pregnancy is one outcome of risk behavior, but all the illnesses, it doesn't have to be AIDS, but STDs, all that good stuff, all that bad stuff. There are a lot of issues involved, and we are not on top of them. And somehow we have the belief that if we look away, things don't happen. Way back then when I taught at Vanderbilt, I showed my students, and this is Vanderbilt, very educated, very rich kids. I showed them a movie that was called, in my population course, that was called Hope is Not a Method. And you would be amazed about the giggling that went on in this course. When I showed the film, a lot of the stuff was totally new to them. And I thought to myself, well, here you come from a family with all the resources, and you still don't know. Because we live in a culture where, we don't want to talk about certain things, and we believe that if we don't talk about it, then things will be fine. And the empirical outcome is that things are not fine. And that's something we could do. And then finally, the sad thing to me, at least from where I'm coming from, is often people who are against sex education, who really don't help us prevent unwanted birth, are also against abortion. And then I stretch it one step further. I do a lot of work on poverty. People who often are against abortion, as it not in the sense that it should be birth control device, but as something that a family may need to, if they decide that they need an abortion, they could have an abortion. People who are against it then often are also against supporting the babies once they're born. And that's why we have, and that's why the one demographic group with the highest rate of poverty in the country are children. So there's a real disconnect on all three levels, and it's always easy to talk about the Ethiopians who should have fewer children, but this is something more closer to home, something that hopefully we could do something about it. So let me stop here. I'm sure I've said a lot of controversial stuff, and then we'll go on. Thank you very much.
We have questions for Dr. Singelmann? Yeah. Apparently we do.
It's my understanding that the thing that put the lie to Paul Eric's predictions of overpopulation was an exponential growth in agricultural productivity. Is that too simplistic?
To some, I think it's a bit, it's of the Malthusian argument that Malthus, 150 years prior to that, had thought that we would run out of foodstuff, and what people didn't realize is how successful the world was. I think he was a bit more sophisticated than Malthus was, and he looked at other things, but I think people didn't realize that there's also, we live in a market economy, and pricing really matters. I mean, I'm not, I talk about regulation, but one regulation is price regulation. As, if we had to pay, let's say, $3 in taxes for every gallon of gas, we would change our behavior. I have a little car, suddenly I could see the road, which I cannot see. Surrounded in Texas, I just got here 3 months ago. I'm surrounded by these skyscrapers. But I think that's one of the things. And I would still argue that we are creating sort of an artificial shortage of food, of this, in my view, ill-conceived policy of ethanol. I mean, if you look at what's happening, we're spending more calories in producing ethanol than the calories we get out of ethanol. We are creating a lot of runoffs into our rivers, and it's ecological devastation. The trucks that have to bring all this stuff, and then we increase food prices in developing countries. So on any level, biomass fuel is fine, but we shouldn't use stuff that we could eat to burn. I think we should stop our demand. It's the same argument that we cannot drill ourselves